Welcome to No Sleep, where the night never ends, and every whisper in the dark could be something real. Tonight's story isn't just horror. It's a memory, a warning, a door that should have stayed closed. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. It started like any other late night. Chris and I had just finished eating at a dingy old diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that never closed and always smelled like burnt bacon and broken dreams. It was nearly 1 a.m., and the parking lot was shrouded in a pale fog that curled around the lampposts like smoke from an invisible fire. We were laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. Life had been rough, but that night, we let it go. We joked about old classmates, terrible dates, and the nonsense of adulthood. But that laughter died fast. Chris stopped walking mid-sentence. I didn't notice at first. I just kept talking, words tumbling from my mouth like dominoes. When I finally glanced back, he was hunched over, one hand gripping the rusted guardrail that lined the sidewalk. "Chris?" I said cautiously. He didn't answer. His shoulders were trembling. I jogged back toward him, unease crawling up my spine like icy fingers. "You good, man?" He looked up. His face was pale, too pale, and his eyes were wide with something I couldn't read. He opened his mouth to speak, but only managed a gurgling noise. Then he staggered back 2 steps and collapsed like a puppet, with its strings cut. I caught him just before his head hit the pavement. His body was hot, feverish, but at the same time his skin felt wrong, slick, almost waxy, like rubber left out in the sun. "Chris, hey, stay with me." I slapped his cheek lightly, no response. His lips were turning blue. Panic surged through me. The hospital wasn't far, maybe 10 minutes. I slung his limp arm over my shoulder, half dragging, half carrying him to the car. His breath was shallow, quick. Every few seconds, it had paused just long enough to make me think it had stopped completely. I fumbled for the keys, my hands trembling. Once inside, I tore down the empty road, redlining every turn. Streetlights flickered as we passed beneath them, casting warped shadows on the windshield. The city felt off, like we were moving through a film set abandoned halfway through production. That's when Chris made a noise, a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't a groan or a cough, it was a hum, low and droning, like a distorted tuning fork. His eyes fluttered open for a moment and locked with mine in the rearview mirror. Only, they weren't his eyes. They were black, completely. No iris, no sclera, just void. I nearly drove off the road. Then, as quickly as it happened, his eyes shut again and the humming stopped. What the hell was happening? When the hospital finally came into view, I felt a flicker of hope. I skidded into the emergency lane, jumped out, and yanked open the passenger door. Chris was limp again. His skin had turned a strange gray color, veins visibly crawling beneath the surface like worms under wet paper. He was still breathing, barely, but it sounded like something wet was trapped in his lungs. I screamed for help as the automatic doors parted with a hiss. Inside, everything felt too quiet. No loud beeping, no frantic nurses, no patients groaning behind curtains, just silence. A nurse appeared out of nowhere, almost too quickly, and together we placed Chris on a gurney. She didn't say a word, not a single question, no clipboard, no name tag. I tried to follow, but a heavy-set security guard stepped in front of me. His eyes were emotionless. His voice was colder than the tiles beneath my feet. "You'll wait in the waiting room," he said. "I just want to make sure You'll wait?" There was no arguing with him. I could feel it. Something primal in my gut told me not to push it. I backed away. As I stepped into the waiting room, that uneasy sensation I'd been ignoring bloomed into full-blown dread. The lighting was dimmer than it should have been. Fluorescents buzzed softly, and the air stank of something sweet and rotting beneath the antiseptic, like meat left in a freezer that was just a few degrees too warm. The other people sitting around were too still. A man with a busted lip stared at the ground like he was waiting for a verdict. A woman clutched her purse so tightly that her knuckles were white, eyes unmoving. No one blinked. No one looked up, not even when I stumbled in, still out of breath, shaking. The reception desk was staffed by a woman who looked carved from wax. Her skin was smooth in a way that was unnatural, poreless, almost plastic. She didn't move when I approached. I need to know if my friend's okay. Chris, he just collapsed. She raised one finger. Silence. I stepped back slowly and sat in the nearest chair. It was cold, damp. I shifted and a faint crinkle echoed beneath me. I reached under and pulled out a piece of yellowed paper. 9 rules, scrawled in frantic handwriting. I skimmed them. Rule 1, avoid making eye contact with the receptionist between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. Rule 4, if you hear your friend calling from the hallway, do not follow. My skin crawled. What the hell kind of hospital was this? I looked up. The receptionist was watching me now, directly. I hadn't even realized the clock above the desk had ticked past 2:01 a.m., and her eyes were not her own. I tore my eyes away from the receptionist just in time. Her gaze had locked onto mine, and I swear, for a second, her pupils dilated outward, swallowing the whites of her eyes like ink in water. I looked down at the list in my hand, my breath catching as the first rule screamed back at me. Rule 1, avoid making eye contact with the receptionist between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. The digital clock above the reception desk ticked in jerky, mechanical movements. 2:03 a.m., my skin turned to ice. Don't look. Don't look back. I kept my head down and shuffled to the corner of the waiting room, clutching the wrinkled page like a lifeline. My seat let out a groan as I sank into it, but none of the other visitors reacted. They remained inanimate, as if they were props staged for a scene that never started. The man near the vending machine hadn't moved in over 5 minutes. His hand rested inches from a bag of chips, frozen mid-grab. His mouth hung slightly open, not blinking, not breathing. I stared too long. His head twitched, just a little, and his eyes shifted toward me. I turned away quickly, heart hammering against my ribs. Something was wrong with them, with everything. The lights above flickered again. The air had a thick, syrupy weight to it, as if the molecules were slowing down. My skin prickled. That's when the phone at the reception desk rang. It didn't ring like a normal phone. It rang like a scream, high and warbled, like someone was strangling it through a tunnel. The receptionist didn't move. None of the other people stirred. It rang 3 times, then stopped. I held the list up again, searching for a rule about phones. Nothing. I was still reading when I felt it. A chill. Not a breeze, not cold air. A presence. Like something just entered the room and didn't want me to know. I didn't dare look up. Instead, I slowly shifted my gaze across the waiting room, starting from the floor tiles, up the legs of chairs, past the immobile figures, until I reached the hallway leading to the ER rooms. There, barely visible in the weak light, stood a man. He was tall, dressed in what looked like an outdated hospital gown, but his skin, it shimmered like old plastic left in the sun. His arms hung too long, elbows bowed backward unnaturally, and he had no face, just stretched skin, where eyes and mouth should have been. I blinked. He was gone. I squeezed my eyes shut and exhaled slowly. The list, the rules, they had to mean something. My fingers traced Rule 5. Rule 5. If a power outage occurs, stay seated and do not move. My blood ran cold. Why would that even be a rule? Unless the lights went out. I couldn't even hear the click. Just sudden, suffocating darkness, swallowing everything. The buzz of the fluorescence died instantly, leaving behind a silence that was too perfect, too controlled. I didn't move, not an inch. I sat there, every muscle clenched, eyes wide open and seeing nothing. My ears strained, desperate for any sound. And then I heard it. Wet footsteps, one by one, slowly, coming closer. Slap, slap, slap. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but the paper in my hands crinkled, reminding me, do not move. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then they stopped, right in front of me. I could hear breathing, deep, ragged. It sounded hollow, like the lungs weren't meant to breathe at all. A cold drop of moisture fell on my face, then another on my hand. Drip, drip. My jaw trembled, lips pressed tight. I didn't dare inhale too loudly. The thing in front of me let out a low exhale, something like a growl behind a grin. And then, the lights snapped back on. I gasped. No one was there, but a puddle of black, tar-like fluid stained the floor in front of me, stretching toward the exit hall, and my shoes were soaked. The other people in the waiting room were still in their seats, as still as mannequins, but the receptionist was standing now, facing the wall. Her head was tilted upward at an unnatural angle, neck craned so far back that her chin pointed toward the ceiling. Her hands were twitching, glitching. I didn't know where to look. I just stared at the rules again. I whispered them out loud. Maybe it would help me feel anchored. Avoid eye contact. Don't walk down the hallway if I hear Chris. Stay seated during outage. I skipped down to Rule 4 again. Rule 4. If you hear your friend's voice calling from the hallway, do not leave the waiting room to look for them. Right then, like on cue, I heard it. Adam? It was distant, barely audible, but it was his voice. I knew it like I knew my own. Adam? Help? The hallway stretched out in front of me, impossibly long now. At the far end, shadows danced under a buzzing light. Adam, it's me. I don't know where I am. It was getting closer. Something inside me pulled hard. My instincts, my humanity. But I remembered the rule. I clenched my fists and turned away. Then I heard it again. But this time, it was coming from behind me. Adam. The voice was closer than before, whispering. Right next to my ear, I jerked in my seat, nearly leaping out of it. But I did not look. I bit down on my tongue to stop myself from screaming. That whisper wasn't Chris. It wore his voice, but something was off. Too soft, too slimy. Like it slithered through his vocal cords instead of vibrating them. Then the whisper changed. It began humming. That same low, droning hum I'd heard in the car. I slammed my hands over my ears. When I finally opened my eyes, the voice was gone. The hallway was empty. The receptionist was back at her desk. And the other visitors were smiling. Their heads turned toward me in perfect unison. Their smiles were too wide. I clutched the list of rules tighter, now trembling and damp in my hands. 2:27 a.m. 3 more minutes until I could look at the receptionist. 3 more minutes to survive. 2:29 a.m. My eyes remained fixed on the floor. I counted every breath, every second, gripping the list so tightly that my fingers ached. 2:30 a.m., a quiet sigh escaped my lips. I finally dared to glance at the receptionist. She was back at her desk, motionless, her face vacant and slack, as if nothing had ever changed. I exhaled slowly, but the moment I relaxed, it happened again. "Adam," Chris's voice. This time it was different, sharper, clearer, urgent. "Adam, please, I can't move. I think something's wrong with my legs." I froze. This wasn't a whisper. This was a cry. My mind began racing. It could be real. Maybe he had regained consciousness and needed help. Maybe I was just letting fear manipulate me into inaction. But the rule, the cursed, damning rule, echoed in my mind. Rule 4. If you hear your friend's voice calling from down the hallway, do not leave the waiting room to look for them. What if the rules were a trap? What if this one rule was the exception? "Please," the voice called again. It was closer now. "I don't know where I am. It's cold." I gritted my teeth. I couldn't sit here like a coward. Chris was my best friend. I dragged him here to save him. What if I was just letting him die alone? Screw the rules. I stood up. The air shifted the moment I crossed the threshold into the hallway. The overhead lights flickered violently, buzzing like swarms of wasps. The hallway, which had seemed short from the waiting room, now stretched impossibly long. Dozens of doors on each side, all identical, all slightly ajar. And they were all dark inside. I walked slowly, each step amplifying my sense of regret. "Chris," I called, forcing confidence into my voice. "You there, man?" No answer. Then, "Down here." It was faint, coming from somewhere far ahead. I swallowed the rising bile in my throat and kept walking. The floor beneath my shoes began to feel strange, soft, like wet carpet. The air smelled foul, like rotting copper and mildew. I passed a door that slowly creaked open on its own. Inside, a hospital bed sat in the center of the room. A figure lay under a sheet, completely still. Something inside me said, "Don't look." But I was already turning. The shape under the sheet twitched. I stepped back. Then the sheet slowly peeled back on its own, revealing a body twisted unnaturally, arms bent in the wrong directions, mouth open in a silent scream. But what chilled me to the core was that it was wearing my clothes. I bolted down the hallway, heart hammering. "Adam," the voice called again, but now it sounded wrong. The inflection wasn't right, like someone was mimicking human speech without understanding how emotion worked. I stopped and turned a corner and froze. A doctor stood in the hallway, back turned to me, swaying slightly. He wore a surgical mask and a blood-stained lab coat. His gloved hands trembled, holding a bone saw. He hadn't noticed me yet. I started to back away. Then, slowly, he turned his head, only his head, all the way around to look directly at me. His eyes were empty sockets, and yet I could feel them lock onto mine. A sound, like metal scraping bone, echoed through the corridor as he took a step toward me. Then another, and another. I spun around and sprinted. The hallway behind me grew longer with every step, like the building was stretching itself to keep me trapped. Doors slammed shut as I passed them, sealing off escape. My legs burned, my chest heaved. I turned a corner and stopped dead. There, hanging from the ceiling like a grotesque marionette, was a woman in a hospital gown. Her hair was black and matted, hanging like seaweed. Her limbs were too long, her head rotated unnaturally, eyes black and shining. She dropped. I screamed and slammed into a nearby door, tumbling into a pitch-black room. I scrambled to find the light switch. Click. The lights flickered to life, and I wished they hadn't. The walls were covered in photos, hundreds of them. all of me. Every photo showed me sitting in the waiting room, standing in the hallway, even opening this door. I looked around, heart thudding. On the wall in front of me, a photo was still developing, an old Polaroid. It showed me in this exact room, staring at the camera. But in the photo, I wasn't alone. There was something behind me. I turned. Nothing. I rushed out of the room and down the hall, toward where I thought I had come from. But the hallway had changed. The paint on the walls was peeling now. The ceiling dripped dark liquid, and every door was sealed shut. I was lost. Completely. Then through the muffled silence, I heard it again. Adam. But this time, the voice wasn't Chris's at all. It was mine. I ran. Finally, at the end of the hallway, I saw it. The faint green glow of the exit sign. I stumbled into the waiting room, slamming the door behind me, gasping for breath. Everyone was still seated like before, except now, they were all staring at me, smiling. Their eyes were jet black. I backed into the corner. The receptionist looked up for the first time. "You broke Rule 4, she said, her voice low and smooth like oozing syrup. "Now you belong to the halls." I looked down at my shirt. 3 deep red scratch marks were carved into my skin. I didn't remember getting them. I didn't feel them. But they were there, bleeding and burning. I collapsed back into my seat, chest rising and falling rapidly. The list of rules slipped from my hand and landed on the floor. Someone picked it up and handed it back to me. It was the man from earlier, the one with the busted lip. Up close, I saw he had no eyes, just gouged, empty sockets. But he smiled as if he could see me perfectly. "You should pay closer attention," he said calmly. "This place doesn't like rule breakers." I looked at the list. A 10th rule had appeared, written in what looked like blood. Rule 10. You don't get to leave again. I didn't know how long I sat there, shaking, clutching the blood-stained rule sheet in my trembling hands, watching the figures in the waiting room watch me. Time had warped into something meaningless. The clock above the reception desk flickered numbers that didn't make sense anymore. Sometimes it ticked backward, sometimes it froze. But I was still here. Chris was still missing, or worse. And I was starting to realize I might never leave this place. The man with no eyes had returned to his seat and resumed his blank stare at the floor. The others did the same. Still, silent, like puppets waiting for strings to pull. My fingers were slick with sweat as I gripped the paper. I reread every line of the rules, this time mouthing each word aloud like an incantation. They weren't just guidelines. They were survival. Something had changed in the air. It was colder, still, like the hospital had stopped breathing. That's when the receptionist stood. No warning, no motion before it. One moment, she was slumped at the desk like a wax dummy. The next, upright, rigid. Her head jerked unnaturally toward the hallway, and so did the heads of every single person in the waiting room. I turned to look. The hallway lights went dark again, one by one, from far to near. Something was coming, and this time it wasn't pretending to be Chris. The buzzing silence was broken by a sound, like long fingernails being dragged across tile. Slow, rhythmic, scraping. The first shape emerged at the edge of the corridor. A silhouette, tall, impossibly thin. Its limbs dangled at awkward angles, each joint bending in the wrong direction. Its skin shimmered under the flickering light like wet plastic wrap. It didn't walk. It twitched forward in brief jerks, like an old stop-motion film playing too slow. I backed into the wall, too paralyzed to move. From the corner of my eye, I saw the receptionist slowly sink behind her desk again. as if hiding from the thing that shouldn't exist. Then came another sound, tapping, soft, deliberate, from above. I looked up. A woman, no, a thing shaped like a woman, crawled along the ceiling. Her limbs moved like a spider, knees bending up beside her head, elbows cracking with every motion. Her face was twisted, partially human, partially stretched. Her mouth was locked in a rictus grin, her eyes gone, replaced by black pits that dripped something alive. She stopped directly above me. Then she turned her head upside down until it hung just inches from mine. "Rule 8, she whispered in a gurgling tone that wasn't her own. I gasped and looked at the page again, heart racing. Rule 8, as your shift nears its end, resist the urge to fall asleep. Stay awake and alert at all costs. I hadn't even thought of sleep, but now, with the terror mounting, I felt exhaustion washing over me like a drug. My vision blurred, my eyelids drooped. No, not now. I slapped myself across the face. Hard. The ceiling creature cocked her head at the sound and hissed, not in pain, but in disappointment. She crawled backward into the ceiling shadows and disappeared. But the hallway creature was still approaching, each step scraping a new line in the linoleum. As it got closer, I saw more of it. Its torso was stitched together from different skin tones. One arm was longer than the other, ending in clawed, wet fingers that dragged behind it. The thing had no face, only a gaping black void where a head should have been, and behind it came more, dozens. A nurse missing half her face, her jaw swinging loose with every shuffle. A man in a hospital gown, eyes gouged out and sewn shut with red thread, dragging a blood-soaked IV pole behind him like a leash. Children holding hands, identical in every way, even their empty expressions. Except one had a missing foot and floated slightly above the ground. I was surrounded. They weren't just apparitions, they were residents. This place wasn't a hospital anymore. It was a hive, and I was the buzzing that disturbed it. I backed toward the doors, but they were locked. My hands fumbled with the handle, cold metal biting my fingers. I looked behind me. The figures had stopped, inches away, their heads tilted in unison. From the center of their horde stepped a single figure dressed like a security guard. Neat uniform, clean boots, perfectly combed hair. But his smile, too wide, too hungry. I knew him from before. He had stopped me when I brought Chris in. "Leaving already?" he asked, voice calm and professional, until the corner of his mouth twitched and extended far past his cheek. "That's not allowed." I shook my head. I just need to know if Chris is okay." The figures behind him began to sway, their bodies rocking like wind-blown grass. "Chris is processing," the guard said. "He's adapting to the rhythm. You will too." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled list again, brandishing it like a crucifix. "I followed the rules," I stammered. I came back. I didn't." "You broke Rule 4, the guard interrupted, his tone darkening. "You heard the voice, and you went looking." He took a step forward, and now, "They've seen you." Suddenly, the lights went out again. All of them. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. 100 unseen bodies surrounded me in the dark, whispering gibberish, just at the edge of hearing. Then, a red glow flickered above me. The security monitors behind the desk switched on. All of them. Camera feeds from different hallways, operating rooms, stairwells. And in every single one, I saw myself. Dozens of versions of me. Walking, running, screaming. Trapped in infinite loops through the hospital. But in one feed, camera 9, I wasn't alone. I saw Chris lying on a bed, eyes wide open, mouth moving, but no sound. Standing over him was the receptionist, and she was smiling. "Chris," I gasped. I didn't know if I said it aloud or if my voice had died somewhere in my throat. My face was frozen, staring at the grainy image on the flickering monitor. Camera 9. There he was, still, pale, alive. Maybe. Lying on a gurney in some distant, unseen part of the hospital. His mouth moved as if trying to form words, but the video had no sound, only static crackling beneath his desperate motion. And then there was her, the receptionist. Only now, in the dim, distorted resolution of the camera, she no longer looked vaguely human. Her arms had become elongated, sinewy things that coiled down to the floor like tangled IV lines. Her hair was writhing slightly. Her face, blank, expressionless, slowly began to peel open like a flower of skin, revealing countless twitching teeth beneath. I staggered back. The feed on camera 9 went black. I grabbed the rule sheet again, trembling. Rule 7. Camera the 9th of May captured disturbing images. When alerted by a low-pitched beep, maintain unwavering focus on the camera until it turns off. I'd broken it. I hadn't kept my eyes on it. I looked away. And now, Chris had vanished. The other cameras all began to flicker, one by one, then shut down completely, except one. It showed the waiting room from an overhead angle. I was the only one in it. Everyone else, the man with no eyes, the woman clutching her purse, the childlike twins, the pale receptionist, were gone. The chairs were empty. But the video feed was still playing, and in it, I saw myself sitting there, my real self. Yet as I watched, the figure of me slowly turned its head toward the camera and smiled. My blood went cold. The lights buzzed overhead. One of them popped, raining sparks onto the stained tile floor. I was done waiting. I stood up. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't sit there anymore like a rat, waiting for the trap to spring. If Chris was really here, somewhere real, I had to find him. Maybe if I found him, I could break whatever this place was. I moved toward the hallway again, but this time it looked different, less like a hospital and more like a rotting carcass of one. The walls pulsed slightly, as if breathing. Black veins ran beneath the paint. Every door I passed was sealed shut and lined with rusted chains. I didn't call out for Chris this time. I didn't want anything answering back. I turned a corner and froze. Chris was standing there, at the far end of the hall, wearing the same clothes, same messy hair, same tired expression. His skin looked warm, real. I blinked and he was closer, like time skipped. "Chris," I whispered. He smiled. "It's okay, man," he said. His voice was calm. "They let me out early, said I was fine." The words were exactly what he would say. Too exact. I took a step closer. "Where were you? What happened?" Chris shrugged casually. "I blacked out, woke up in a bed. They ran tests. Said I was stable." He smiled wider. That's the word they used. Stable. Something clicked in my brain. The nurse. Back in part 1. She had said Chris was stable. The exact same word. Exact tone. Exact inflection. "Are you really Chris?" I asked, more to myself than to him. His smile twitched. And then he said it again. "They let me out early." The exact phrase, same delivery, like a recording on loop. I took a step back. Chris blinked slowly, and the corners of his eyes cracked, as if his skin had dried into a painted mask. "You okay?" he asked, tilting his head. The bones in his neck popped as he twisted it. I ran. I turned down another hallway, sprinting as fast as I could. My shoes slapped against tile, echoing like gunshots through the corridor. I didn't stop until I slammed into a pair of swinging double doors, marked stairwell, and burst through them. Stairs spiraled upward and downward endlessly. I went up. Every step felt like a mountain. My chest burned. The fluorescent lights above flickered with each floor I passed, until they simply stopped. But a glow waited above me. I reached the final landing and pushed through the last door. To my surprise, I was back in the waiting room. Only this time, it looked normal. No flickering lights, no black veins, no ghostly figures. The receptionist was back at her desk, reading a clipboard. Visitors were scattered about, talking quietly, scrolling on their phones. The television was showing a news report. The clock read 6:02 a.m. Daylight trickled in through the entrance glass. It was over. It had to be. I let out a sound, something between laughter and sobbing, and sank into the nearest chair. The receptionist glanced up. Her eyes looked human, normal. I sat there for a moment. My hands still trembled, but the cold sweat was starting to dry. The taste of fear faded, replaced by disbelief. Relief. Then I heard it. "Hey, man." I turned. Chris. He looked normal. No black eyes, no cracked smile, no stitched skin. Just Chris, standing there with a coffee in hand. "They let me out early," he said, smiling. I froze. He raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" He looked confused by my reaction, genuinely confused. "Don't worry," he added. "I'm good. They ran some tests. Just a blood sugar thing. I'm fine." I searched his face. He looked real. Sounded real. "Come on," he said. "Let's go home. You look like hell." I stood up slowly. We walked out the hospital doors into the early morning light. My skin tingled in the breeze. Everything looked brighter than I remembered. Too bright. Like my eyes weren't adjusted anymore. We got in my car. I started the engine. As I pulled onto the road, I passed the digital clock on the dashboard. 4:31 a.m. What? I slammed on the brakes. Chris looked at me calmly. Then he smiled. This time, the smile stretched, just a little too wide. The dashboard read 4:31 a.m. But how? The hospital clock had said 6:02. We had left. We had escaped. Beside me, Chris sat calmly, eyes watching the road, as if he hadn't noticed the sudden, impossible rewind in time. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the skin of my palms slick with cold sweat. "Chris," I said slowly, "what time did they release you?" He blinked, then smiled again. "They let me out early." Same tone, same inflection. Again. I didn't respond. I just stared at him, his face, his hands, his skin. And then I noticed, just beneath the collar of his shirt, on the side of his neck, a thin black thread, almost invisible. It ran into the skin like a stitch. I hadn't seen it before. I was sure it hadn't been there earlier. I turned the car around. "Hey, where are you going?" Chris asked casually. "Back." He didn't protest. He just sat silently as the hospital came into view again. Except, it wasn't quite the same. The building looked older now, almost abandoned. Windows were boarded. One flickering light buzzed weakly above the ER sign. The entrance doors were open just enough for shadow to pool out onto the sidewalk like spilled oil. "I forgot something," I said quickly, pulling into the empty lot. Chris stayed silent. I left the car running. As I crossed the threshold of the hospital again, the list reappeared in my pocket. Crumpled, damp, familiar. I unfolded it. The same rules stared back at me, smeared and stained, but legible. My fingers trembled as I ran down the page, stopping at one I hadn't forgotten. Rule 9. If a security guard tells you it's time to leave, check the clock before listening. It's safe to leave after 6 a.m. That had been my mistake. I hadn't checked the clock. And now the world outside wasn't real. Chris wasn't real. None of it. It had been too easy. The rules weren't warnings anymore. They were commandments. I was no longer just a witness. I was a participant. And this hospital wasn't a place. It was a ritual, a machine, a test. And I had failed. As I moved back into the waiting room, it was just as I had left it before. The artificial calm, the flickering lights, the buzzing silence. The receptionist was gone now. The other patients were mannequins again, wax figures posed in human habits, and the clock read 4:35 a.m. I had 90 minutes. 90 minutes to do what? To survive? To wait? To follow the rules to their final dot? I slumped into the corner chair and focused on my breathing. The rules. The rules were all I had. They were the only logic in this twisted reality. I reread them. And then I saw it. A new line, written in jagged red ink beneath Rule 10. Rule 11. If you see yourself, do not acknowledge it. Do not speak. Do not follow. Before I could fully process that, I heard footsteps from the far end of the waiting room. I looked up. He stepped into the room. Me, same clothes, same scratched cheek, same panic in his eyes. He stumbled in and looked around, just like I had hours before. His hand gripped a paper identical to mine. He didn't see me yet. Not yet. I slowly backed into the shadows of the corner, praying he wouldn't turn. If I said anything, if I interacted, would I be the cause of a loop, a trap, a replacement? Don't acknowledge. Don't speak. Don't follow. The other me moved through the room, repeating everything I'd done, almost frame for frame. He found the rule sheet under the chair. He began to read. I watched him the way a ghost might watch a living person. Then, the lights flickered, buzzed, and cut out. Total black. I froze. Rule 5. During power outages, stay seated and do not move. I clenched every muscle in my body. Then, a whisper. Not a voice. Something more primitive, like breath across bone. My name, again. But this time, from behind, I didn't turn. I couldn't. Rule 8. If you feel a sudden chill, do not look over your shoulder. It was freezing. My ears rang with silence. Something moved behind me, its presence heavy and pulsing like a migraine. I shut my eyes. Hands brushed the back of my neck. Fingers lingered near my ears, but I didn't move. Not 1 inch. A moment later, the lights snapped back on. The figure that was me was gone. Or maybe I was now him. I didn't know. I stared at the clock. 5:12 a.m. Just 48 more minutes. But time had become unstable. It ticked and warped. Minutes stretched. Seconds skipped. I sat there, rocking back and forth. And then, the security guard returned. The same man from before. Too tall, too clean. His mustache still perfectly combed. His teeth still too white. Too many. "Sir, it's time to leave," he said, his tone cordial. My heart thudded. I glanced at the clock. 5:37 a.m. Not yet. Not yet. "Sir," he repeated, "your friend is stable. You can come with me." I shook my head, lips dry. "I'll wait," I whispered. The smile faded. He leaned down, so close I could smell burnt hair and ozone. "You're learning," he said. "They won't like that." He turned and walked away, his shadow stretching far too long across the floor. I watched him go. My whole body trembled. I was so close. The rules had teeth now. every second was a blade I had to walk without slipping. The hospital seemed aware of me now, breathing in time with my heartbeats, watching. The rules were keeping me alive. But the moment I broke even one, I wouldn't be. I glanced up at the clock again. 5:59 a.m. One more minute. Then I could leave. If the rules were right. If the rules weren't just a trick. If they ever wanted me to leave at all. The second hand of the wall clock jerked into position, like it was dragged there. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited. 1 second, 2. Then the automatic doors at the front of the ER hissed open. For a moment, nothing came through. Then a figure emerged. It was Chris. He looked like himself again. No twisting grin, no stitches, no mimicked phrases. He was walking normally, his face flushed with color, his clothes fresh. His hands were tucked into the pockets of his hoodie, and he was smiling. "Hey," he said, casual as ever. "You ready to go?" My mouth was dry. Are you real this time?" He tilted his head. "What kind of question is that?" But then he laughed, and it sounded real. It felt real. "I'm fine," he said. "Seriously, I woke up maybe 20 minutes ago. They said my vitals were solid, and they didn't find anything. I asked about you, and they told me you were still in the waiting room." I searched his face for any trace of the nightmare version I'd seen before. There was nothing. His eyes were tired, but human. His voice steady. His movements natural. I stood. Every part of me resisted, but I looked at the clock. 6:01 a.m. The rule? Rule 9. If a security guard tells you it's time to leave, check the clock before listening. It's safe to leave after 6 a.m. Chris wasn't a guard. No one had forced me. It was after 6. This was it. I nodded. We walked through the doors together. The morning air hit me like a splash of cold water. For the first time in what felt like 100 years, I saw sunlight. Faint, pink, still hidden behind early fog, but real. It stung my eyes. We got in the car. The real car. The radio played soft static before switching to a local news report. I glanced at the dashboard. 6:04 a.m. Everything was lining up. Chris leaned back in his seat, cracking his neck. "Man, you look like you've been through hell." "I have," I muttered. He laughed again. "No, really?" I didn't answer. I just kept driving, my eyes flicking to the side mirror, then the rear view. Nothing followed. I let out a long breath. My muscles, for the first time in hours, relaxed. I made it. I survived the hospital. And then, the trees began to look wrong. Not drastically, just subtly off. Too still. Too symmetrical. The shadows beneath them didn't match their angles. I looked at the road. It was smooth. Too smooth. No cracks, no potholes, no markings. And the sky, still dark, like dawn had stalled. "Chris," I said carefully, "what's today's date?" He didn't answer. I looked over. Chris was staring forward. His mouth was slightly open. A soft hum buzzed from his throat. The hum, the same one I'd heard in the car when he passed out. I slammed the brakes. The car screeched to a halt. Chris's head snapped toward me, but not like a human head. The movement was sudden, mechanical, like a machine responding to an input, and his smile had returned. The wrong one. Too wide, too flat. "Time to go back," he whispered. I bolted. I left the car running and sprinted into the trees. The forest was endless. The shadows between the trunks twisted in impossible ways. I heard whispers from behind the bark, my name repeated over and over. I didn't stop until the ground beneath my feet changed. It wasn't dirt anymore. It was tile. I looked down. I was back in the waiting room. Again. Same seat, same buzz of the lights, same yellow-stained rule sheet in my hand. And in front of me, the security guard stood. He grinned. "Welcome back," he said. "No," I whispered. The clock read 1:07 a.m. The beginning. I had never left. None of it, Chris, the car, the forest, had been real. Just another loop, another layer, another test. The waiting room felt heavier now, the lights dimmer, the mannequins stiller, and the rule sheet in my hand had changed. There were now 12 rules, a new one at the bottom. Rule 12, there is no escape. Only repetition, only obedience, only observation. A thick silence settled over me, cold and eternal. I wasn't a visitor anymore. I was part of the hospital now. I was one of the watchers. Somewhere behind me, a door creaked open. Footsteps entered the room. I didn't need to look. I already knew. Another version of me had just arrived. New, fresh, terrified, clutching a blank rule sheet. I looked at the chair beside me, and for the first time, I understood why the people in this room never moved. They weren't mannequins. They were just like me. They had all tried to leave. They had all come back. I closed my eyes and waited for the next rule to be written.